In 1971, a group of ordinary college students walked into a fake prison and never quite walked back out the same. No war, no dictator, no centuries-old empire. Just a basement, some uniforms, and 6 days that would shake the entire field of human psychology to its core. Because what happened inside that building was not supposed to happen. The researchers had a plan. They had rules. They had clipboards and observation notes, and all the confidence of people who thought they were in control. They were not in control. Within 24 hours, something had shifted. Within 48, it had darkened. And by day 6, the experiment that was supposed to last 2 weeks had to be shut down in a panic, because the line between pretending and becoming had completely disappeared. This is the story of the Stanford Prison Experiment. And the deeper you go into it, the more unsettling it gets. Welcome back to Epoch Stories, the channel where history stops being a list of dates and starts feeling like something you lived through. If you're new here, you picked a great story to start with. Stay with us. Stanford University, California. Summer of 1971. A young psychology professor named Philip Zimbardo had a question that had been bothering researchers for years. Not a simple question. The kind that keeps you up at night. The kind that makes you wonder what human beings are actually made of underneath everything society layers on top of us. He wanted to understand whether the cruelty seen inside real prisons was caused by the type of people who ended up there, or by the environment itself. Were guards brutal because they were naturally brutal people? Or did the role transform them? Did the uniform do something to a person that they couldn't explain or control? To find out, he built a fake prison in the basement of Stanford's psychology building. He recruited 24 college students, all of them screened carefully, all of them psychologically healthy, none of them with criminal records or histories of violence. He randomly divided them into 2 groups. Half would be guards, half would be prisoners, and they would play out those roles for 2 weeks under observation. It sounded almost boring on paper. It was anything but. The prisoners were not simply told to show up. On the morning the experiment began, real Palo Alto police officers arrived at the homes of the student prisoners without warning and arrested them. They were handcuffed in front of their neighbors, placed in police cars, driven to an actual police station, booked, blindfolded, and then transported to the fake prison in the basement. Zimbardo wanted the shock of a real arrest to be their entry point. He wanted them to feel it before they even arrived. It worked. The moment those blindfolds came off, something changed. The basement hallway had been converted into a corridor of cells. There were guards waiting, wearing military-style uniforms and reflective sunglasses, deliberately chosen so the prisoners could never make eye contact with them, never see their humanity, never connect. The prisoners were given smocks to wear, no underwear underneath, and a chain bolted around one ankle. They were assigned numbers instead of names. From that moment forward, guards were instructed to refer to them only by number. Strip away the name, and you start to strip away the person. The first day passed with an uneasy quiet. Everyone still knew, on some level, that this was a study, that they were students, that Zimbardo was watching from behind a camera. But something began shifting on day 2, and it shifted fast. The prisoners staged a small rebellion. They barricaded themselves inside their cells, ripped off their prisoner numbers, and shouted at the guards. It was a protest. A reminder that they were human beings who had rights, even inside this game. The guards did not respond the way researchers expected. Instead of calling for help or stepping back, the guards improvised. They used fire extinguishers to blast the prisoners away from the cell doors. They stripped the rebels naked. They took away mattresses. They turned one cell into a privileged cell and placed the prisoners who had not rebelled inside it, giving them better food and better conditions so the others could watch through the bars. Nobody told the guards to do any of this. There was no script for it. They invented it themselves. And that was the moment Zimbardo should have stopped everything. He didn't. Before we go further into what happened next, if this story is pulling you in the way I think it is, take 2 seconds right now. Hit the like button, drop a comment telling me what you think of the Stanford experiment, and subscribe to Epoch Stories if you haven't already. Every like and every comment helps this channel keep telling stories that actually matter. Now, back to that basement. By day 3, the psychological collapse had begun, and it was the prisoners who broke first. One student, prisoner 8612, began screaming uncontrollably. He cried. He raged. He pressed himself against the cell door demanding to be released. The researchers watching assumed he was faking, trying to get out of the experiment early. Zimbardo himself initially thought it was an act. It was not an act. The student was genuinely falling apart. He was released, but not before Zimbardo had kept him in that basement long enough to raise questions that still haunt the experiment's legacy today. More prisoners followed. Some went silent, staring at walls for hours. Others became robotic, doing exactly what they were told without reaction or resistance. One prisoner went on a hunger strike in protest, and the guards responded by putting him in a tiny closet they called the hole, telling the other prisoners that they could get him out early if they gave up their blankets. Most of them didn't give up the blankets. The prisoners stayed in the hole, and the guards, who had started the week as regular college students, were now conducting psychological warfare without a second thought. What made this experiment so deeply disturbing was not just what the guards did. It was who they were doing it to. These were their peers, students just like them, randomly assigned to the other side. And yet within days, the guards had stopped seeing prisoners as equals. Some of them began enjoying the power. They woke prisoners up at 2 a.m. for roll calls that served no purpose. They made them do pointless exercises. They forced humiliating routines just to assert control. One guard, later referred to in research as the most aggressive of the group, reportedly told an interviewer years later that he had modeled himself on a character from a film. He had given himself a persona to inhabit. And once he put on that persona along with the uniform and the glasses, he left himself somewhere outside that basement door. The role had consumed the person. By day 6, a doctoral student named Christina Maslach, who would later become Zimbardo's wife, came to observe the experiment for the first time. She was not there from the beginning. She had not been slowly desensitized alongside everyone else. She walked in, saw what was happening, and was horrified. She confronted Zimbardo directly. She told him that what was being done to those students was wrong, that it had crossed a line, that the people in that basement needed to be let out. And Zimbardo, who by this point had become so absorbed in his role as prison superintendent that he had lost his own objectivity, heard her and paused. He stopped the experiment the next morning. What was supposed to last 14 days had lasted 6. The Stanford Prison Experiment became one of the most famous and most debated studies in the history of psychology. It was held up for decades as proof that ordinary people, placed in the right conditions, could become capable of cruelty they would never choose on their own. That institutions shape behavior. That power, even fake power, does something real to the human mind. But the story did not end cleanly. Years later, recordings and personal accounts surfaced suggesting that Zimbardo and his team had not simply observed the guards. They had coached them, encouraged them to be tougher. The line between a natural psychological experiment and a directed performance began to blur in uncomfortable ways. The experiment that was meant to reveal something about human nature ended up revealing something about the nature of research itself, about how much we want certain answers, about how easy it is to lose objectivity when you are inside the story you are trying to tell. Here is what stays with you long after you walk away from this story. Those guards were not monsters. Those prisoners were not weak. They were ordinary people caught inside a system that told them who to be, and most of them believed it within 48 hours. That should make every one of us ask a quiet, uncomfortable question about the roles we play every single day, the titles we carry, the uniforms we wear, the systems we operate inside of without ever asking why. Because if it happened in a basement in 6 days, what does a lifetime of it do? That's the story of the Stanford Prison Experiment. One of the most chilling chapters in modern psychological history, not because of what the guards did, but because of how little it took to get them there. If this video made you think, made you feel something, or made you see human behavior differently, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Epoch Stories so you never miss a story like this one. And leave a comment below telling me this. Do you think you would have played along? Or do you think you would have been the one to walk out? I'll see you in the next story.